Good morning. Today is Friday, the 22nd of June, and I welcome you all to my live podcast. I'm Bob Pace, I'm your host, and here we are to talk about how to fight with CPS and, of course, save your children. Um, this entity, CPS, the Child Protection System, which I call CPS. I know in some states it's the Child Protection Service, other states the Department of Children's Services, DCS. Other states it could be other acronyms. But when I'm talking about the Child Protection System, I'm talking about the entity that's a branch of social services that provides, food, clothing, and shelter, and those kinds of things. The social services has a branch that was enacted by Congress and has history going back to the colonial days of the 1600s. And their sole purpose is to protect our children from neglect and abuse. Now, I want to emphasize neglect and abuse, and also to do family reunification. What's so sad is this entity breaks apart the family. Why do they have to be reunified? They break them apart badly to break them apart. Why? Because this is a rogue entity. And what I mean by rogue, it's pretty much uncontrolled from federal and state management of it. It varies from state to state. But it's solely for the purpose of making money off your children. They traffic your children, which is against the law, and they put them into foster care. And the reason being so they get the money from the state, who gets the money from the federal government. It's an $80 billion business. Now, what I mean by billion, I'm talking about billion. That's more money than we give the war in Ukraine. We're given all the states money, and the states in turn gives money. Now, they give them to the counties. The counties administrate the protection of our children and family reunification. But they also charge excessive. In Orange County, which I had my case in, it's $20,000 per child per month. In LA County, it's $15,500 per child per month. In the state of Washington, it's $800. It varies from state to state. But it's so much more than it really costs necessary to take care of a child. The reason why it's excessive is to give their workers bonuses, because these social workers are very corrupt. They lie, they deceive, they're not transparent, and they do revenge. And I'm telling this from personal experience. I'm also saying the over 500 people I've talked to since October in all the states. I'm talking about all the states. It isn't just one state or anything. They have something in common. Their children are immediately taken into custody, whether they're in imminent danger or not. Now, if a child is being hit against the wall or being hurt or abused, they need to take the child into custody. I realize that. But in my case, I was being accused of neglect because I had my parents' belongings stacked in my home as I was sorting through them and sending them off to relatives because my parents were dying. They wanted to liquidate their home. And anyway, they're dead. They're dead. They died when I was involved in CPS. And I think that's terrible because they would roll over in their grave what they'd done to me. In fact, I had to sell my home. I worked 40 years to get 40 years of hard work. I've been working for over 60 years. And at age 60, I lost my job through no fault of my own. I had work to do, but the agency couldn't release the funds on the work. There were government contracts through the state called Caltrans in California, and there are various projects that had been awarded to me. But the agency was out of money and they were going to go bankrupt like Detroit, Michigan was. So they thought they'd do creative finance and says, okay, you have $53 million worth of contract work with us. We need access to that money to help the state from going bankrupt. We're going to take that money, and even though you've been awarded a public contract and the money is supposed to be used for that contract, we're going to write you an IOU, meaning that we'd still plan to have you do the work, but at a later date. And so I tried my best to get credit lines. And at that time in 2010, the banks weren't interested because they gave out so many predatory loans, meaning loans for people that weren't qualified. And in 2007, the banks folded and collapsed because of predatory loans. Everybody was getting a loan for a home and they were reneging on it. And so the financial institution collapses. And I had a countrywide loan, and I should have saw the red thing on the walls. They refinanced me twice. They gave me a home that I thought, how did I qualify for? On top of that, they gave me credit lines. Not only do they give you a loan on your first, they give you a credit line. Why do I need a credit line? Oh, in case you need to pay a bill. They knew they were giving me a home that would be too hard to make the payments and based on my salary. And I later found out that they changed my income. They doctored my documents. Why? Countrywide people wanted to make money off the transaction. That was a big boom those days, to write out loans and give them away because they got lots of money for getting a loan. And the guy that gave me the loan lied through the teeth. And he's still in business, by the way. He's still going out there making loans for another company. And the bank that took over for Countrywide was Bank of America. And they didn't care. And I had to sue Bank of America, my bank. And I won my case against them, but I got very little money. I got very little money from them. It cost me more to sue them than the money I got. So I had to sell my home because I needed to hire an attorney. And that's my rule number one. You need to get an attorney. So I'm starting a little differently. I know, it's like I do this twice a day, 7 days a week. I'm on at 10 o'clock in the morning for an hour Pacific Standard Time, except Sunday. Sunday, I'm on at 8. And then at nighttime, I'm on every night at 7 a.m. for an hour. And I try to talk differently. I try to present things differently so it isn't so repetitious or boring. And I take things out of sequence, and I have lots of topics to talk about: the ICWA, the 3-8 motion, ICPC. There's so many different things I can talk about, and help you based on my experience and based on the experience of others in this room. Now, speaking of this room, this is a live podcast. You found me on Facebook. I'm transmitting on YouTube. I'm using the application called StreamYard application. StreamYard application. And there's several ways you can interact with this podcast. This is a live podcast, and I like people to interact. And one way is you can call in to 626-698-0990. That's my office number. I will answer during my show times, 10 o'clock in the morning every day the week, except Sunday at 8, and at nighttime, 7 o'clock at night. But that's the only time I answer. So if you call after those times or before those times, I can't answer the phone call. So I have to wait to my show time. And somebody the other day wanted to talk, and I can only do one call at a time, by the way, on my phone. I can put the call on hold and talk to you for briefly, but I can only do one call. And so the best way to be on my podcast is to be a guest. And I have a great show producer. Her name is Grace. She works hard behind the scenes to keep me in line, to keep the shows going, and do all the podcasts for the law offices of Vincent W. Davis and Associates. That's the one that produces this podcast. And the chief attorney for the law firm is Mr. Davis. And I'll talk to you about him in a few minutes. But all you need to do is to schedule to be our guest, because then if you're our guest, you can talk and it's easy, and we can still take phone calls and comments, and you can answer on those or help me answer those or talk about your case. And you can schedule that time by emailing Grace at vincentwdavis.com. That's Grace at vincentwdavis.com. And she'll gladly put you one of my 14 podcasts. You just say, I want to be on Bob's Wednesday night show, or I want to be on Bob's Friday morning show, or I want to be on Bob's Sunday evening show. So it's just evening or morning and 7 days of the week. You don't have to worry about a date or anything else. You just say there. So there's 14 shows. There's always room for guests. We had several guests last week. They were great, and I enjoy that. I love to have a social worker, a child protection system social worker as my guest. I have had one call in, and for 40 minutes, she told me how she does things, which is great because I know there are good social workers. And I know that in some places in our country that they do protect their children from neglect and abuse and do family reunification. So if there's a hiccup with the family members or the family as a unit, they can be temporary, work on what the deficiencies are, and then the children should be primary placed with next of kin. This is the sad part because an allegation comes in, and they're either by a lay person or a professional. The only difference is professionals are required by law to report neglect or abuse, and they're a little bit more responsible than a lay person. A lay person, sad to say, does retaliation against their neighbor or against a family member or against their spouse. And I'm sad to say a lay person will call in, and let's say there's nothing going on, but they don't like the neighbor's dog barking. So they call in a neighbor and say, this person so-and-so is doing this to the kids. And of course, the social worker has to investigate within 24 hours. And they find out this person has no kids. Well, there you go. You got a lay person abusing the system. Or they don't like your yard growing on theirs. They do that. Or they see something that they don't see comprehensive. So anyway, allegations are made randomly, and they're made all the time. And you are guilty by those allegations until you're proven innocent, by the way. It isn't like other courts where you are innocent till you're proven guilty. This time, someone cries wolf, you're guilty. And I hate to say it, CPS is so corrupt that they believe it. They believe it, and they are corrupt. I don't care what anybody says. And I can say this example. In Prescott, Arizona, there's the Department of Children's Service. That's the CPS system, the Child Protection System, for Arizona at Prescott. Well, in 2022, 8 social workers with over 25 years together of experience decided it was, I don't know, they thought it was humorous thing, made pink T-shirts. And on the front of the pink T-shirts, it says, professional kidnappers. Now, what does that message tell you? Professional kidnappers. That's derogatory. That means they know how to take children. They know how to traffic children. They know how to steal children. And on top of that, on the back of the T-shirt, if the front wasn't enough, they said, do you know where your children are at? It's like they're baiting the parents out there. Do you know where your children are at? And then they paraded. Not only was it for the office, they paraded in department stores. They went to Walmart. Can you imagine the look on families, mothers and fathers with that? Well, they were soon caught and they were fired. They were fired, and none of the social workers will say anything. They won't talk to the media because maybe they're. Anyway, these social workers were fired as well as the director. That's 8 of them. Well, the department only had 9 social workers, and the other guy was a guy. So here's the department with one person left that handled the protection and neglect of children in Prescott. And, if you need a job, maybe there's a job opening there. Not all states require college degrees. I've learned that a lot lately with my friend in Richmond, Kentucky, Faye. Faye is a remarkable woman, and she has taught me so much and said so much to me. I want to welcome the Truth Movement. Welcome. And he says today, whatever, they're putting the 10 commandments in school. What do you think of that? And do you think it's a violation of constitutional law? Well, we're not here to talk about other things except child protection system. And that's a whole separate thing that I would have to have a separate podcast to talk about political things. So with your comment, I appreciate that. I know the importance of that to you and what you fight and stuff, but this isn't the forum. This is a room that deals specifically with the CPS cases, child protection services, where the parents are wrongly have their children taken, and all about CPS and my rules about how to fight them. Tanya Seabright, I think you're new. I don't know if you've been on before, but after fighting years, they terminated my rights the day after my birthday, April of last year. Well, I hope you appeal that decision. And by the way, we're starting to get comments in, so I need to tell you how the comments need to come in the room. It's very important that when you are typing your comments, and I'm glad to have your comments, that it's about CPS questions. It's about the child protection system questions. Please show your name, your city, your state, or if you're from a country, show them your country. And be complete with your CPS case. So, for instance, if you have 4 children that were taken and 4 separate fathers, and I need to know everything, how it got started, the allegations, and where you're at. So be very complete with your case, because we'll go back and forth like ping pong ball. And, you'll say one comment, then I'll ask a question. Then you'll say another question, and so forth. So it's easier. Or you can call in. I've already shown you my number, and I'll show it up again. But I want you all to be aware of that when you type in comments, please tell me. The Truth Movement's been on before, and I forget where you're at, but he's actually talked on the show too. So Tanya further says, Tanya Seabright, from whatever state you're at, I completed 4 mental health assessments and 2 assessments. Yeah, they try to get parents to be crazy. Social workers are notorious for doing that. So anyway, that's when you want to type in your comments. I give you a phone number. And then the third way is that if you want to be a guest on the show, and that's where you write into my producer, Grace at VincentWDavis.com. That's Grace at VincentWDavis.com. And she'll glad you put in. She'll give you the link to StreamYard, and you can be on the show as a guest. And it's probably the best way to do it, next to calling and comments. So email Grace. So those are 3 ways you interact with the room. I'm going to go back and put my phone number up there because I'm open to phone calls, and I'll take your call. That's my office number, 626-698-0990. Now, the people that just have come in the room, again, I'd like to welcome the Truth Movement and Tanya Seabright. And Tanya, a year ago, had her rights to her kids terminated. And I need to know more, Tanya, because I don't know if you did an appeal or not, because they should never terminate your rights. I don't know what you did, and maybe you can tell me about your case a little bit more. Again, try to be complete with your case so I don't have to play ping pong ball and go back and forth. And so, Truth, if you have something you want to talk about CPS, I'll gladly talk to you about it. Okay? So this is a room about the Child Protection Services and how I can help you with my case. I've been fighting CPS for almost 15 years. So I have a lot of knowledge. I have a lot of things. I've mentioned ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, the 388 motion, the JV 180, the ICPC. There's all kinds of topics that I can talk about. We were talking yesterday about mental health and how social workers can diagnose someone to have a mental health problem so they can take your kids. It's easier if you declared that you have mental health problems. And we talked about special needs and adults that have special needs and children and so forth. So I'm open to any topic you guys want to talk about. All you need to do is type it, call it in, and we can talk about it. I'd like to hear more, Tanya, about your case and how I can help you. Right, we got a phone call coming in. All right. It's area code 843. Good morning, and who am I talking to? Well, they came on and they went off, so I will call them back again. I don't know why they would hang up. Now, what call did I miss? Okay. Hello? Yeah, hold on a second. I got two calls on the line. Let me see who the other call is. Hold on. Hey, Faye?
Yes.
Did you call in?
Can I call in?
No, did you call in?
No, not I hadn't yet, no.
Okay, somehow you've been looped in. I'm going to hang up as I got another caller, but come on the show if you can. I forgot to text you. I'd love to have you join me on the show. I will talk back to you. All right, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Bye.
Okay, hello. This is Bob Pace, and I'm speaking to someone with 843. Can you identify yourself? Is this Tanya Seabright? Tanya, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, this is Tanya Seabright, right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm glad you called in, Tanya. And I'm sorry for the confusion. You're live on my show. You're on my speaker, so everybody can hear you. And I want to welcome you. I'm not sure if where you're from. What city and state or country are you from?
I'm from Rockford, Illinois.
You're from Illinois. What was the city called?
Rockford.
Rockford, Illinois. Okay. I don't have anybody from Rockford before, but welcome. And I've had several people call from Illinois, and you were talking to me about a case where your parental rights were terminated?
Yes, they were. The day after my birthday in April of last year.
Yeah. And how did this whole thing start? I mean, start from the beginning so that we can understand why they would terminate your rights.
So in 2019, I was involved in a domestic violence situation. My youngest child's father tried to take my life, take our daughter, and run away with my best friend. Well, when they had sent out the intact services, I had complied with their, I went and had the assessment done. I got the order for protection. I did all the things that they had asked me to do. But because I wouldn't sign the piece of paper that said that I would ask the court to terminate my parental rights if I didn't abide by their contract, they left my children with me. It was October of 2019, and then the caseworker or the investigator called me, I want to say in November, right around Thanksgiving, and had told me that I didn't do what I was told, and that she's going to take me to court and take my kids from me.
Right. Can you start from the beginning? Because you suddenly, it's like you jumped a space. I mean, did they come to your home? Did they send you a letter?
Yes.
Did they do a phone call?
The police were called.
Okay.
So the police had called.
The police were called, and the police in turn probably called the CPS services, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then they came, and because you had domestic violence, did they put a restraining order against, was that your husband or boyfriend?
A boyfriend.
Okay.
And
So
I put the restraining order against him.
Okay. So that doesn't make you the bad parent just because you're not protecting your children. You have an abusive boyfriend. Now, was that boyfriend the biological father of your child?
Yes.
And is that how many children do you have? One or more?
Just one with him, but I have three altogether.
Well, okay. I need to know how many is your family. So your family of three. Now, is the biological father the same with the other two children? Or are they different biological fathers?
They're different.
So you have three different biological fathers with three children, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And these three biological fathers, are any of them involved with the case or were involved with the case?
Two of them were. One that was there pretty much from the beginning, and then the other one came toward the end.
Okay. So the first biological father, is he done with your children, or does he want to do any more of the help, or he's out of the picture?
He was out of the picture. I was with him from 13 to 26, and he just didn't have the capacity of having a teenage child, I guess.
Okay, so he is no longer in the picture. Now, what about the biological father too? Is he in the picture?
No.
Okay, so those two fathers out. Now, the third biological father, when you had domestic violence, is he involved with wanting the child?
No.
Okay, so you have three fathers that want nothing to do with their children. And you yourself, because you have a restraining order against the third biological father with your third child because of domestic violence, they decided to take the child away from you because you're not protecting the child? Is that what the reason was?
Yeah, so they took all three of them 2 months after the incident occurred, and they used allegation 60.
Now, I don't know Illinois that well to know what allegation 60 is. What is allegation 60?
I'm pretty sure they're the same, but it's an environment injurious to the welfare and well-being of child.
Okay, and even though you have a restraining order which says that the other person is the one doing it, did you ever go to court, the trial court, regarding the restraining order?
Yeah, I did.
And was the guy convicted?
Yes, he was.
Well, then that should have been proof enough to social services, to the child protection system, that you were not guilty. You did protect your children, and the children should be returned to you. Now, in the beginning, when they tried to take your children, how that happened? Did they come to the home with a warrant, or did they come to your home and you allow them in, or what happened?
No, they made me bring they wanted me to bring my children to the court. So, because they didn't take my kids right away. When the officer called BCFS, they came, they met with my kids, they met with me. They did not take my children.
And the reason why is probably because you weren't the perpetrator, your boyfriend was. So something made them change their mind. Now, why did you want to bring your kids to social services? What led you to believe you had to do that?
I didn't. The woman filed papers with the judge, with the court, and
a warrant.
They made me bring,
a warrant. Did you?
It wasn't a warrant. It was a court date.
It was a court what?
The warrant was never issued.
So how did they? Date. They just said you have a court date and you're supposed to bring your children. Now, at that time, of course, you probably didn't contact a lawyer, right?
Well, I did, but the lawyers were not of any help. I actually
here's what happens is that they will appoint you a lawyer if you can't afford one. The one they appoint you, though, will have a caseload of 30 people, and they'll do nothing for you, and they'll only talk to you when the hearing is taking place. They're a waste of time.
Even my paid lawyers only did that.
Really? You paid an attorney. Now, the attorney you picked,
2 of them.
Were they a dependency attorney, a dependency family attorney? What kind of attorneys were they?
Yeah, I mean they were criminal, but they had they had done previous parental custody cases before.
But had they fought CPS?
Yeah, they have.
Okay, so when the first attorney you hired didn't perform, did you file something with the bar to make a claim against that attorney for not performing? Did you do that?
No, and unfortunately, because I didn't know the court system. I've never been in trouble before this.
Okay.
So I didn't understand the process at all.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking to me, and then unfortunately, COVID happened in March.
Oh.
So right after they took my children. I actually had taken my kids to my cousin's house before court that day because I wasn't going to have them rip my kids from me. So,
well, no, and you're right, because you can leave them, by the way, you can leave them with a next of kin or family. You're allowed to do that. You're not allowed, you don't have to put them in foster care and stuff like that. They can be with a family member, next of kin. And they don't have to be in the same state. They don't have to be in the same state. They don't want to because they got to pay more money.
Yeah, I had actually tried to, because, COVID, my caseworker kept telling me that there was nothing I could do to start my services, and that I just had to wait things out. Well, after so long of waiting, I was tired of waiting, and I actually had asked about maybe getting my case transferred to Tennessee. I had some family down there. I could do my services. They weren't COVID restricted.
Now, did they contact the ICPC? Did they contact the ICPC? Which is an agency that transfers the children safely between states. Okay.
Yeah, my caseworker told me it was Interpol, and she told me that they denied that they wouldn't transfer my case.
Why?
She didn't give me a reason.
And it looks like they were buffaloing you and leading you around with, it's terrible how they do that. I feel for you because I didn't know a lot of these things either myself. And one moment, please. I want to welcome Faye to our room. She's from Richmond, Kentucky, and she's on almost all the time. And she says, this is a link talking about HIPAA and use of psychological notes and records. Okay, Faye. She put that link in there. Thank you, Faye. And now she asks you, Tanya, did you ever appeal your termination of parental rights? Did you appeal that?
I did. And
what happened? What happened?
After I lost.
Now, did you use an attorney to appeal it, or did you appeal it yourself?
Yeah. No, I had an attorney. And after reading through the appeal, I was, the lawyer made sure, even though I didn't speak to him, but maybe twice, 3 times, I think. They never really talked to me, any of them. But so he had put in there how, not once, not twice, not 3, but 4 different times. I went through 4 different agencies. I had YSB. Well, the first one to come out was LSSI, which is
Wait. Can you stop there for a second? You say 4 different agencies. Agencies of what?
The CPS.
What? I'm sorry.
So every year I got a new caseworker and a new agency.
A new agency. Did they move you from county to county?
Yeah.
They can move you from county to county? That's very strange. Because where it took place, it's really strange, because the way it's supposed to work, I'm not saying it does, is that if you have an allegation of abuse or negligence against you, and the child and you reside
the court never moved, but my case did.
I'm sorry, what?
The court date, like where my head court at, that never changed, but my caseworkers and their locations did.
Well, how did you get passed around?
I wish I could answer you.
I know it's hard. It is hard, and I'm sorry that if you can't. Let me. People are listening and trying to help you, and let me. I'm trying to find. Hold on a second. I got to get my. I thought my volume was up, and I don't see it here. Let me double check. I think I had turned it down here. Let me try to turn it up. Okay. I'm at full volume now, so hopefully the people can hear us. Faye, can you hear me? And can you go ahead and speak, Tanya? Say something.
Can you hear me?
Can you speak a little louder?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Faye, could you hear her?
Okay.
Faye, I'm waiting for her to respond. She did say something, but if you could speak, I know you're speaking softly, which is great. And if you're a guest on my show, it'd be a lot better. But the phone is the best I can do, and I'm holding the phone speaker close to the microphone on my computer. And she says she can hear you a little bit better. Okay. Now, for all you listeners out there, and we have several people in the room, and several people in the room that not really have signed in that are listening. We have about 10 people that are listening right now. I have a woman from Illinois who a year ago got her parental rights terminated. And it looks like she's been wrongly accused of at first, she called for domestic violence. She has 3 children with 3 different husbands. 2 of the husbands are gone. The 3rd husband is the troublemaker, and she got a conviction against him. So he's out of the picture. But somehow, a month or 2 after that happened, the CPS decided, the Child Protection System in Illinois decided to remove her children. And at first, they had told her to bring the children to the court or to the office, and she didn't do so. She left them with a relative. Then what happened when you didn't show up with the children? What happened next?
We went forward with the court hearing. About halfway through, they called it for a recess. So everyone left in the courtroom. Well, I was the only one ever allowed in the courtroom. Nobody could be in there with me. So.
Well, wait a minute. Didn't you have an attorney with you?
My attorney could be there.
Oh, was he with you?
Like I couldn't have any family support, or he was.
Right. Okay. Now, was that the attorney you hired? It wasn't a public defender.
Correct.
Okay, so she
That was the
hired
first
an
way that
attorney.
happened.
For all you listeners out there, she hired an attorney because she's trying to fight her case. And the domestic violence, the man that did it was convicted, and she had the criminal court, have a judgment against him. So, with that judgment, did your attorney present that judgment to the court?
So he hadn't been convicted yet, but yes, there was.
Oh, he hasn't been convicted. I'm confused. So,
but the charges were.
The charges were what? I dropped you. I don't know what you're saying.
He had been filed. Charges were filed.
Okay.
But there was not a conviction yet. But he was
so why are they making you come into court? What neglect or abuse are you doing to your children?
They said I didn't sign the paperwork. I didn't do what I was told to.
Okay. Now, what is this paperwork they wanted you to sign? What did it say?
Well, it's their so it was part of the your service plan. And so I told them that I didn't want to take in-tax services. They told me that it was a voluntary program. And so I had respectfully said, well, I understand it's voluntary. I am now sole provider for my family. I have to get a job and make sure that I can take care of my kids. Now, while I'm willing to comply with whatever you need me to do, I'm not going to sign a piece of paper that binds me to a contract that says, look, if I don't meet your expectations, I'm going to ask the court to terminate my parental rights.
And what did your attorney say?
I did not do that.
What did your attorney say? What did he advise you or she advise you of?
Well, he told me that that we would go to court, and that they basically had told me that there was no reason for them. They had no grounds to take my children from me.
So, on the advice of your attorney, you did not sign the paperwork. So they go to court, and what did your attorney do in court for you?
So he started to explain to the judge that, I was obviously the victim of this incident and that I was not a perpetrator by any means, that the children were left in my care for 2 months, so that the investigator at the time, and they did not believe the kids, were unsafe. So they, about halfway through, they called for a recess. And I was trying to figure out what was going on exactly, and when we came back in from recess, the investigator came in after everyone else and said, Your Honor, we have reason to suspect that Mr. Pink, who was my abuser, had the children with him, which was not true. My children were already 45 minutes away at my cousin's house.
Did your attorney present that to the court to answer back that the children are with your cousins?
Yes, and officers actually, the judge called her, she stopped court. They sent an officer to my cousin's house.
Okay.
My children were there.
All right. Were they there?
Yes, they were.
So then what did the investigator do next in court?
Well, the judge came back with tears in her eyes. She was literally wiping tears away. And she removed my children from my care.
Why?
Because the woman said that they believed that my abuser was around the kids and he wasn't. I don't know.
But they came to the house and the abuser wasn't there.
Correct. Now, he'd been gone for 2 months already.
And you had a restraining order against him. So by law, if he's within 100 yards, he can be arrested.
Correct.
So what was the judge? What was the judge thinking? What was the judge thinking?
Well, like I said, she had tears in her eyes. I don't think that she was very happy about it.
But then why is she? I mean, unless the judge is in cahoots with the social workers, which I'll believe, my judge and the social workers' attorneys and the children's attorneys and the social workers and the clerk, the bailiff, were all in cahoots.
All of them.
So they're all in cahoots. So you got a corrupt judge then. You got a corrupt judge. So did your attorney try to fight? Did he try to counter the judge and say, Your Honor, We went to the house. Your partner wasn't there. The father of the children wasn't there. He has a restraining order, Your Honor. He's supposed to keep 1,000 yards away. Did your attorney try to fight those arguments?
No. In fact, they just took my kid.
So your attorney was a flake.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say that all attorneys are not good. A lot of them are flakes, just like social workers, just like judges.
I mean, yeah. So I've got 2 judges in my case, actually. In the state of Illinois, I'm one of the only people. After COVID happened and everything, so it's kind of all right. So they removed my children. Then my kids were with my cousin. I had tried to get services because COVID shut everything down. I couldn't get services anywhere, or so I was being told.
What kind of services were you trying to get when COVID shut everything down? What kind of services were you trying to get?
So I didn't know exactly what I needed because the service plan, I didn't sign that in the beginning, so I didn't know. I knew my children were taken for domestic. I had no prior alcohol or substance abuse issues. I had no prior domestic issues. I had no arrest or anything prior to this. So December, they removed my kids, December 3rd of 2019. March, COVID, everything was shut down. I couldn't do anything. Come April, I told my caseworker, look, I'm tired of waiting. I want my children back, So, and that's when I had asked her about moving the case to Tennessee. One, my abuser's not out walking the streets there. He's not, and I could do my...
Well, I don't still understand. Doesn't everybody recognize that when you have a restraining order, they have to stay 100 yards? Are they going to risk of being arrested if they're within 100 yards of your children?
Right, and he was nowhere around. He was at the house. I don't even know where he was. He was gone,
So then how did they prove that he was there?
They didn't. They didn't prove anything.
And your attorney didn't, again, like me, argue the case. He didn't want to argue the case.
I don't think he was allowed to be honest with you.
Well, this is, okay. I don't know if you watched many weeks of court cases on the news in New York. We had Donald Trump, and then we had the Hunter Biden thing. And you could see what goes on in court. And I can tell you, a good attorney can argue anything in court to the point where they almost get thrown out of court. And it sounds like your attorney, and no offense, I don't know him, that he was a mouse. All he was is an attorney.
That was the problem.
Okay, maybe that's the problem, is you were picking attorneys that were cheap, and what you got was a cheap attorney. And I'm sorry, that's wrong. I had to sell my house. That I worked 40 years to get enough money to hire what I felt is the best attorney. That's Vincent Davis. He got my kids back. If I had hired him sooner, I lost one of my children because they were convinced by the social workers to divorce us as parents, divorce her brother, divorce her cousins, divorce her grandparents, divorce all the family members, everyone, and then to seal her birth certificate like she wasn't born to us, and change her name and be adopted by foster care, all because of the coaching of a rogue. I don't know what else to call social workers. I'm trying to be nice to them because I've only met one social worker that was civil, and she came on my show. Her name is Carol from Maryland. She was civil, but that was one out of a million social workers. All I know is I think about the pink ladies. And just the other day in Chicago, Illinois, a social worker on her Facebook page posted an ad that said Black Children for Sale. It was an 1848 ad from the Civil War. Well, before the Civil War. It was an old ad, 1848. You can look this up on the internet. It's all over the internet. This social worker in Chicago, Illinois, placed it on her Facebook, an ad, Black Children for Sale. And that is wrong because we were we were at a period of time of slavery, in our country ever since you brought over slaves since the 1600s, and that was mainly to help do the cotton and the tobacco and the farming, those things. And they were easy victimized because they're brought over from Africa and they lived in tribes. And the movie Roots talked all about that. I think Roots well depicted. There's been sequels to that. But these African people have always been enclosed as slaves. They were kidnapped by the Egyptians to help build the pyramids. It seems like Africa is the number one spot besides the Chinese that came over to build railroads of slavery, which is wrong, And so I'm trying to tell you, that's the mentality of social workers in the state of Illinois. If they are allowed to place on their Facebook black children for sale, that's gross. That's gross. This is 2024.
My caseworker's profile picture, she was an African American woman. I'm Caucasian, and this was right around the time of those riots that were happening.
Right.
So my caseworker's profile picture said, "All lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter." She would tell my son that she was going to buy him a Golden Girls jogging suit for Christmas. She threatened him to the point that he soiled himself before she made good on her threat of taking my children, separating them, and placing them with strangers. My son spent Christmas in a stranger's home, African American home, which it's culturally different. That's all my concern was. It's a culture difference.
There's nothing wrong with, this thing about matters, Black Lives Matters. All lives matter. All lives matter. And so I think that we all have to become colorblind to races because it's always been that way. It's always been that way. It's been that way for thousands of years. If you look at the Egyptians when they took the blacks as slaves. So I know that the black culture has had a hard battle because they stand out maybe because they're dark in color. The American Indians they were like slaves too. In 1875, after the last war, I think the last war, the Indians won at the Little Bighorn. The Lakota Sioux defeated General Armstrong Custer. And, the Lakota Sioux had to go to reservations. The children had to have their hair cut. They had to wear Western clothes, not their Indian folklore clothes. They could no longer speak the Lakota Sioux language. They could no longer practice their culture. And they were taken off to Indian schools and not to see their parents. In fact, for 100 years, from 1875 to 1978, which is a little more than 100 years, when a law that was passed that CPS no longer could take the Indian children and have them adopted, that they had to first make sure that they, if they're of native blood, that they were turned over to the tribe first. There's 547 federal recognized Indian tribes in this country. And the reason why I know a lot of this because I'm a Lakota Sioux, and I'm proud to be it. But I don't look it because my great-great-grandfather was a Viking from Bergen, Norway. And my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, two greats, is from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. And those two, had a child that had part European look and part Indian look. And that was my grandfather. And then he had a child, and it certainly gets dissolved into me. So I think I'm a quarter Lakota Sioux and a quarter Viking, based on my father. So what I'm saying is that this thing about race and about everything, we're talking about immigrations now, and it's like the American Indians were the first immigrants. But once you're born here in the United States, you're no longer an immigrant. You have your ethnic background, but you are American. And if everybody would put aside the race and the color and look at everybody as Americans, when you're born here, you're American. In fact, all these millions of people that are coming in the country are having children. They are Americans now. Those children are Americans. They're citizens of the United States. And so they're Americans. So we have a big problem, and believe me. And I know about how important that Black Lives Matter. I know about the Palestinians, and I know about the Israels. It's a terrible, terrible thing we have in our country. But worst of all is the CPS is so corrupt, and I mean it so. I mean it's very, very, very corrupt. Every call I get, everybody I talk to, it seems the case is worse and worse. And your case is no different. Your case is no different. And children are hurt in foster care. And it's wrong for them. And wrong for them to be hurt. Faye, who's in here, was in foster care herself 5 times in her youth, in her childhood, her youth, in her teenage years. She was molested and hurt and raped and everything else. She too had a child. She had a special needs child, and she had daughters. And they, because of her background in social services, they're taking her children, and she's here trying to fight to stay alive. And she has her son that she takes care of because he's a special needs son. And the police are so corrupt in Richmond, Kentucky, that they abuse her son. In fact, the whole state, I'm learning about a lot of things. And what's so sad, it's one of the few states that requires social workers to have a license. I don't know in Illinois. In fact, my new rule, I have a new rule, and I just unfolded now with you. My rule number 4 is that you must research your county and state CPS and learn all you can, because there's so much you can learn about. You have to learn what is qualified to be an Illinois social worker, what they can do and not do. Go ahead.
So my case, it ended up getting to the point where they came and tried to take my sister's children, my brother's children. My brother fought 3 of their cases and actually won. One which they tried to put a second allegation against me and my mother.
Wow.
But what I realized is that it is absolutely the state. I mean, I'm not fighting the local, like the state of Illinois versus me.
Right.
My children. And the corruption is so vast. I like to use the word. So when they're like in cahoots together, different counties, different agencies, it didn't seem to matter. Just like I said, I went through LSSI, which is Lutheran Social Services. Then I went to YSB, Youth Service Bureau. That's where it really, really started bad. My caseworker she did not like me, and she did everything she could in her power. Well, that was the snowball that started.
Yeah.
So after her, I got a caseworker out of DCFS. And then from DCFS, I went to Camelot Care Center. And I actually had a caseworker in Grays Lake, which is about probably 45 minutes from me, and one in Rockford where I lived.
Yeah, Tanya, I'm going to have to stop here because my time has run up. I've gone over 4 minutes. I need to end the show. 5 minutes I've gone over. But can you do this? Can you call or maybe be a guest on my show? All you need to do is write into grace@vincentwdavis.com, and you can be on my show as a guest. And it'll work a lot better because people will be able to hear you better, Tanya. I'm on tonight at 7 o'clock or tomorrow morning if you want to at 10 o'clock or tomorrow night. I'm on 7 days a week, twice a day. So I want to thank you, Tanya, for sharing. I know you're still fighting the issue. There's a lot more questions I have for you. Faye, thank you for coming in here and being supportive and what you do. The Truth Movement, it's always good to see you. I'm sorry we can't talk about your other political issues, but this room is strictly for child protection, the system, about child protection questions. So thank you all for listening. And I want to see you all tonight at 7 o'clock. This is Bob Pace. Keep fighting for your children, and God bless you. I'm signing off.